Picture this. You stand at the edge of Farum, Azula, that impossible city suspended in a perpetual storm, where broken stone bridges reach toward nothing, and ancient dragons sleep in the hollows of time itself. The wind here doesn't just howl, it carries echoes of moments that haven't happened yet, or perhaps happened so long ago that even the stones have forgotten. This is a place where the very concept of when loses all meaning, where past and present collapse into a single, endless moment of destruction and preservation. And it's here, in this temporal anomaly floating beyond the reach of the lands between's normal flow of time, that we begin to unravel one of Elden Ring's most mind-bending mysteries. Welcome, lore seekers, to another deep dive with Keen 7 Lore, where today we're exploring a theory that fundamentally reshapes how we understand our journey as the Tarnished. What if I told you that every step you take through the lands between isn't just a journey through space, but through time itself? What if the reason you can die and return over and over isn't merely a blessing of grace, but evidence that you're experiencing a fractured timeline, playing through events that have already occurred, or perhaps events that exist outside the normal flow of causality entirely? This isn't just idle speculation born from cryptic item descriptions, though those certainly play their part. The evidence for temporal displacement in Elden Ring runs deeper than you might expect, woven into the very architecture of the world, hidden in the dialogue of characters who seem to know more than they should, and most tellingly, split between two versions of the same location that shouldn't be able to exist simultaneously. The Roundtable. Hold you know, that sanctuary where champions gather exists both as a physical place in Lanedale and as an ethereal refuge accessed through sites of grace. But here's what makes this truly fascinating. According to the coded sword found in the Lanedale version, champions gathered at the Roundtable hold in days long past tense, already concluded. Yet there you are, meeting those very champions, very much in the present. The implications ripple outward from this single contradiction. If the Roundtable hold exists in the past, what does that make you? A ghost? A memory? Or something far stranger, a consciousness moving backward through time while believing you're moving forward? The game never explicitly states this, of course. From Software's storytelling rarely hands you answers on a silver platter. Instead, it leaves breadcrumbs scattered across item descriptions, environmental details, and the impossible geography of a world that seems to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Consider how you arrived in the lands between. The opening cinematic shows Tarnished rising from their graves, called back by grace after being exiled long ago. Queen Marika herself banished the Tarnished, commanding them to leave the histories, lands between, to wage war in distant lands, to live and die, and live again until the time came for their return. But when exactly is that time? The game assumes it's now, in the present, after the Shattering has torn the world apart. But what if the Shattering did more than just break the Elden Ring? What if it shattered time itself? If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of Elden Ring's most intricate mysteries, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. It makes a real difference in helping this video reach fellow lore enthusiasts through YouTube's algorithm. Your support means everything and helps keep these in-depth explorations coming, especially when we're tackling theories this complex and fascinating. The concept of the Tarnished as temporal anomalies begins to make more sense when you examine the mechanics of death and resurrection in the lands between. Unlike the undead curse in Dark Souls, where hollowing represented a gradual loss of self, the Tarnished simply return. No explanation beyond grace guides you, but grace itself seems to operate outside normal temporal constraints. Sights of grace appear as golden light that only you can see. Melina confirms this when she first appears, noting that she can only perceive them through your eyes. These beacons don't just restore your health, they serve as anchor points in a reality that might otherwise be constantly shifting. Think about what happens when you die. The world doesn't reset. Enemies you've killed stay dead until you rest at a site of grace. But you return, pulled back from death as if it never happened. This isn't resurrection in the traditional sense. It's more like rewinding your personal timeline while the world continues forward. Or perhaps more accurately, it's like your consciousness is being pulled through multiple parallel timelines, each death shifting you to a reality where you didn't quite die in that spot at that moment. The evidence for this temporal displacement theory becomes even stronger when you examine the state of the lands between itself. This is a world caught in a perpetual state of decay and stasis simultaneously. The Shattering, that cataclysmic event that broke the Elden Ring and plunged the realm into chaos, feels both ancient and immediate. Characters speak of it as history, yet its effects are everywhere, fresh and raw. Battlefields remain littered with corpses that should have long since decayed. Fires burn eternally in braziers that no one tends. The very landscape exists in multiple states of destruction and preservation at once. If you're finding value in unpacking these temporal mysteries and want to explore more deep lore investigations like this, consider subscribing to support the channel and join our growing community of lore enthusiasts. Your support truly makes these deep investigations possible, and there's so much more to explore in the impossibly rich world From Software has created. Let me draw your attention to something that most players encounter but rarely question: the existence of two Roundtable holds. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally two separate physical spaces that are somehow the same place. The first is the one you know well, accessed through sites of grace, populated by fellow Tarnished, presided over by the Two Fingers. The second lies in Lanedale, the capital city, empty and abandoned. A perfect architectural replica, down to the smallest detail. How can the same building exist in two places? The conventional explanation suggests one is a copy created by the Greater Will, a pocket dimension for gathering champions. But the coded sword's description challenges this interpretation fundamentally. Found in that abandoned Lanedale version, the coded sword explicitly states that champions would gather at the Roundtable hold in days long past, not in another dimension, not in a divine replica, but in days long past. The sword exists in what appears to be the real physical location, while you and your fellow Tarnished gather in what the game suggests is the copy. But what if it's the other way around? What if the ethereal Roundtable you access through grace is the original, preserved in a bubble of past time, while the ruined version in Lanedale represents its future state after all the champions have gone? This interpretation gains weight when you consider the characters you meet there. Gideon Ofnir claims to be the all-knowing, yet his knowledge has crucial gaps that suggest he's operating with incomplete information, perhaps because he's literally displaced in time from the events he's trying to understand. The Two Fingers themselves seem to be receiving delayed or corrupted messages from the Greater Will, their guidance increasingly erratic as the game progresses. Could this communication breakdown be the result of temporal displacement, rather than mere distance? The blacksmith Hugh presents perhaps the most compelling evidence. He's bound to the Roundtable hold by a curse, forced to craft weapons until he creates one capable of slaying a god. But he speaks of Queen Marika as if he's personally met her, personally received this charge from her. When could this meeting have occurred? Marika has been imprisoned within the Erdtree since before the Shattering, yet Hugh's memories suggest a direct, recent interaction. Unless, of course, from Hugh's perspective, trapped in the hold's temporal bubble, that meeting truly was recent, even if centuries have passed in the outside world. Roderika's presence adds another layer to this temporal puzzle. She arrives at the Roundtable hold after you meet her in Stormhill, clearly following the same timeline as you. Yet she immediately integrates into this space that supposedly exists in the past, taking on the role of spirit tuner, as if she's always belonged there. Either the hold exists in the present and the coded sword is wrong, or the hold exists in a state of temporal flux, pulling individuals from different time periods into a shared space that exists outside normal causality. The nature of Farum Azula provides our most concrete evidence for temporal manipulation in the lands between. This crumbling city explicitly exists beyond time, according to the description of Miquella's needle. But what does beyond time actually mean in practical terms? The architecture tells a story of simultaneous decay and preservation. Bridges crumble into nothingness, while the buildings they connect remain standing. Dragons sleep in poses, suggesting they've been frozen mid-action. The dragon lord Placidusax waits in a storm beyond time for the return of his god, his multiple heads suggesting a being that exists in multiple temporal states simultaneously. When you enter Farum Azula, you're not just traveling to a distant location, you're stepping outside the normal flow of time entirely. The storm that surrounds the city isn't weather, it's a temporal anomaly, a wound in reality where past, present, and future collide. This is confirmed canon, stated explicitly in item descriptions. But if such temporal anomalies can exist, if the game acknowledges that certain spaces operate outside normal time, why would we assume the player character remains temporally fixed? Consider the method by which you reach Farum Azula, Melina's sacrifice at the Forge of the Giants, or the Frenzied Flame's consumption. Either path involves a fundamental transformation, a burning away of the current state of things. The fact that you arrive in Farum Azula through an act of immolation suggests less of a physical journey and more of a temporal displacement. You're not traveling through space, but through time itself, or perhaps to a place where the distinction between space and time no longer applies. Dragon Lord Placidusax himself serves as living proof of temporal distortion. He waits in an arena that exists in a different phase of reality, accessible only by lying down in a specific spot and somehow shifting your consciousness backward or sideways through time. The game presents this as literally traveling to a different temporal state. You're not just viewing a memory or entering a dream, you're physically present in a moment that exists parallel to, but separate from the normal timeline. The Dragon Lord has been waiting since time immemorial for the return of his fled god, yet when you face him, the battle is immediate, visceral, present. He's simultaneously ancient history and current threat. This brings us to Melina, perhaps the most enigmatic figure in terms of temporal placement. Her first words to you are telling. Traveller from beyond the fog, not tarnished, not champion, but traveller from beyond the fog. The fog she references could mean many things. The fog walls that separate game areas, the fog of war that obscures distant lands, or perhaps most significantly, the fog of time that separates past from present from future. She knows immediately that you're not from here, not from now. You're a traveller, not just geographically but temporally. Melina's own existence defies conventional understanding of life and death, past and present. She claims to have been born at the foot of the Erdtree, yet she's burned and bodiless. She has a purpose given to her by her mother, presumably Queen Marika, yet she's forgotten what that purpose was. She exists as a spirit who can only manifest at sites of grace, those same temporal anchor points that allow you to resurrect. Everything about her suggests a being unstuck from normal time, moving through the lands between in ways that transcend physical reality. Her connection to the Erdtree, burning across multiple timelines, becomes especially significant. In the frenzied flame ending, if you've been marked by the 3 fingers, Melina appears after the credits with a different eye color, vowing to deliver destined death to you. But how can she appear after the world has been consumed by flame? How can she make promises about future actions when everything has already ended? Unless the ending isn't really an ending, unless it's just another point on a circular timeline, or one of many parallel timelines existing simultaneously. The environmental design of the lands between constantly reinforces this sense of temporal uncertainty. Ruins dominate the landscape, but they're not merely old. They're impossibly old, representing multiple layers of civilization built atop one another. The divine towers that activate great runes are ancient beyond memory, yet they respond to runes obtained from recently defeated demigods. The walking mausoleums carry the bodies of soulless demigods, Marika's children, who died in circumstances that remain mysterious, yet they wander the landscape as if their burden is fresh. Architecture in From Software games always tells a story, and in Elden Ring, that story is one of temporal collapse. Buildings exist in multiple states of construction and destruction simultaneously. The Academy of Raya Lucaria floats in a lake that shouldn't be able to support it, accessed by a glintstone key that suggests both physical and temporal requirements for entry. Stormvale Castle is built upon older ruins, which are built upon even older ruins, each layer representing a different era that somehow all exist in the present moment. The archaeological approach to understanding Elden Ring's timeline reveals the impossibility of linear progression. Civilizations that should be separated by millennia overlap and interweave. The Golden Order, supposedly the current dominant force, is simultaneously new and ancient. The Dragon's reign ended eons ago, yet their influence permeates everything. The fire giants were wiped out in a war lost to history, yet one remains, guarding a forge that still burns with purpose. These aren't inconsistencies in world building, they're deliberate indicators that time in the lands between doesn't flow in a single direction. Let's examine the Shattering itself as a temporal fracture rather than merely a physical one. When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she wasn't just breaking a physical object or even a metaphysical concept. She was shattering the fundamental structure that governs reality in the lands between. The Elden Ring contains the laws of nature, the rules by which the world operates. Time itself would be one of these rules. When the ring shattered, time shattered with it. This explains why the demigod's war feels both ancient and ongoing. It's not that the war lasted so long that it became legend while still continuing. It's that the war exists in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Radahn holds back the stars, literally freezing celestial time in place. Millennia dreams in her rot, experiencing visions of a future or past where she's become something else entirely. Godric grafts body parts that should have decomposed long ago onto himself, preserving them through will or through temporal stasis. Each demigod seems to exist in their own temporal bubble. Renala endlessly rebirths her scholars, caught in a loop of creation and recreation that suggests a localized time loop. Rykard, consumed by the god-devouring serpent, exists in a state of eternal consumption and growth, his very existence a paradox of ending and continuation. Morgoth defends a capital that's simultaneously whole and broken, golden and tarnished, populated and empty depending on when or how you observe it. The evidence suggests that the Shattering created not just one timeline, but multiple parallel timelines, all existing simultaneously and occasionally intersecting. This would explain why certain events can happen in different orders, why some characters remember things that haven't happened yet, and why death isn't permanent for beings touched by grace. You're not just dying and resurrecting, you're shifting between parallel timelines where events played out slightly differently. This multi-timeline theory gains credence when examining the various endings. Each ending represents not just a different choice, but a different temporal outcome that somehow all exist simultaneously. The age of fracture, the age of stars, the age of order. These aren't mutually exclusive futures, but parallel presents, each one as real and valid as the others. The game doesn't have a canon ending because all endings are simultaneously canon in their respective timelines. Character dialogue throughout the game hints at awareness of these temporal anomalies. Ranni speaks of her dark path as if it's already determined, yet she needs your help to achieve it. She exists simultaneously as a dead body, a spirit, and a doll, each form representing a different temporal state of the same being. Her quest involves finding her body, which has been dead for ages, yet the body is still fresh enough to be recognizable. She orchestrated the Night of Black Knives in the distant past, yet she's actively planning it in your present. Fia, the deathbed companion, literally embraces death and life simultaneously. Her entire purpose involves creating new life from death, birthing the mending rune of the Death Prince from Godwyn's corpse. But Godwyn died in the past, is dying in the present, and will die in the future. He exists in a state of living death that transcends normal temporal boundaries. Fia's actions make sense only if she, too, operates outside normal time, tending to a death that's eternal and ongoing, rather than a singular past event. The merchants who sing of the frenzied flame tell stories of events that haven't happened yet, or happened so long ago that they predate recorded history, or both simultaneously. Their song speaks of the one great before it was fractured, of a unity that existed before distinction, before time itself, perhaps. Yet they sing it in present tense, as if this primordial unity still exists, waiting just beneath the surface of fractured reality. Even basic game mechanics support this temporal displacement theory. The ability to respec your attributes with Renala isn't just redistribution of skills, it's literally being reborn, reverting to an earlier state while maintaining your memories and experiences. The ability to duplicate remembrances suggests that these boss souls exist in multiple states simultaneously, each one as real as the original. The fact that you can summon spirit ashes, echoes of deceased warriors, implies that death and life, past and present, are far more fluid than they appear. The walking mausoleums provide perhaps the most elegant proof of temporal multiplicity. These massive creatures carry the bodies of soulless demigods, children of Marika, who were never blessed with grace or destiny. Yet they can duplicate remembrances, creating copies of souls from your defeated enemies. How can they duplicate something unique, unless that uniqueness is an illusion, unless everything exists in multiple states simultaneously? The mausoleums aren't creating copies, they're accessing the same soul from different temporal angles. Messages left by other players, a mechanic we take for granted, take on new significance in this context. These aren't just gameplay conveniences, they're temporal echoes, messages from Tarnished in parallel timelines, experiencing the same journey from slightly different angles. The bloodstains showing other players' deaths, temporal shadows, glimpses into how events played out in adjacent timelines. The summoning system doesn't pull players from other worlds, it pulls them from other timelines. other versions of the same fractured reality. The mimic tear, that perfectly duplicated version of yourself, isn't just a magical construct. It's you from another timeline, pulled into your present to fight alongside or against you. The fact that it can use all your equipment and abilities suggests it's not a copy, but an alternate version, equally real, equally valid. When you defeat it, you're not killing a mimic. You're severing a connection to another timeline where you chose differently, fought differently, existed differently. Let's circle back to the Tarnished themselves and what it means to be guided by grace. Grace appears as golden light pointing you toward your destiny. But what if it's not pointing toward the future, but toward the past? What if grace is showing you the path that was already taken, the journey that already occurred, and you're simply retracing steps through a shattered timeline? This would explain why grace guides different Tarnished to different locations. Each one is following their own temporal thread through the fractured reality. The death of Godwyn the Golden, the event that catalyzed the Shattering, exhibits temporal properties that defy linear explanation. He was the first demigod to die, yet his death is ongoing. He's simultaneously dead in body, but not in soul, existing as the Prince of Death who continues to grow and spread through the roots of the Erdtree. Those who live in death, the undead who emerge throughout the lands between, aren't raised from past deaths, but are experiencing death as a continuous state that transcends temporal boundaries. Destined death itself, sealed away by Marika and later stolen for the Night of Black Knives, represents the normal flow of time and causality. With destined death removed from the Elden Ring, death became impermanent. Time became fluid. The rune of death held by Malekith isn't just the concept of death. It's the concept of endings, of linear progression from birth to death. Without it, the lands between exist in temporal stasis, where nothing truly begins or ends. The connection between the stars and time, explicitly stated through Radon's feat of holding back the stars, reveals the cosmic scope of temporal distortion. The stars in Elden Ring aren't just celestial bodies. They're temporal markers, their movements tracking the flow of fate and time. By holding them in place, Radon hasn't just paused Ranni's destiny, he's paused an entire timeline, creating a temporal dam that, when released, floods the lands between with postponed possibilities. The primeval current, studied by the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria, isn't just a source of glintstone magic. It's described as the primordial form of stars and life itself, existing before and outside time. Sorcerers who delve too deep into studying it transform into graven masses, spherical collections of faces that suggest multiple selves collapsed into a single point, perhaps representing what happens when someone experiences all possible timelines simultaneously. Master Lusat and Master Azul, transformed into crystalline forms by their study of the primeval current, aren't just petrified. They exist in a state that transcends normal temporality. They can teach you sorceries that they developed after their transformation. Knowledge that shouldn't exist yet does. They've become unstuck from linear time, experiencing past, present, and future as a single crystallized moment. The Crucible, that primordial form of the Erdtree, where all life was once blended together, represents not just biological unity, but temporal unity, a state before time separated into distinct moments. The Crucible Knights, who carry aspects of this ancient power, display abilities that seem to pull from multiple evolutionary timelines simultaneously. Growing wings, tails, horns, manifesting biological possibilities that should be mutually exclusive. Miquella's cocoon within Mog's palace represents another temporal anomaly. He's simultaneously a child who never aged and an adult attempting to become a god. His needle, capable of warding off the influence of outer gods, works specifically in the storm beyond time at Farum Azula, suggesting that divine influence itself operates through temporal channels. The fact that you can return the needle to millennia, changing an event that already occurred, proves that the past remains mutable in the lands between. The relationship between Miquella and Millennia transcends normal temporal bonds. They're twins, yet their conditions, eternal youth and scarlet rot, represent opposite temporal states. Miquella cannot progress forward in time, while Millennia experiences accelerated decay. Together, they embody the temporal dysfunction of the lands between, proof that the shattering affected not just the present, but the fundamental flow of time itself. As we near the culmination of this temporal odyssey, consider what this means for your journey as the Tarnished. Every boss you defeat exists in a state of perpetual defeat and perpetual threat. Every choice you make has already been made and will be made again. The lands between isn't just a place. It's a temporal maze where past, present, and future intersect and overlap. You're not just playing through a story, you're experiencing all possible stories simultaneously. Your consciousness threading through parallel timelines, guided by grace through a reality where time itself has shattered. The genius of From Software's design lies in how this temporal uncertainty enhances rather than diminishes the narrative. The ambiguity isn't a flaw, it's the entire point. In a world where time has fractured, where multiple timelines coexist, where death is impermanent and choices are simultaneously made and unmade, the only constant is uncertainty. The game doesn't tell you whether you're in the past or present, because the distinction no longer matters. You're in both. You're in neither. You're in the spaces between. This interpretation transforms every aspect of the game. The recurring invasions by NPCs aren't just gameplay mechanics, they're temporal echoes, the same events playing out across multiple timelines. The ability to absolve sin at the Church of Vows isn't forgiveness, it's temporal revision, literally undoing actions that occurred. The presence of spirit summons, phantom cooperators, and blood-stained shadows all point to a reality where multiple timelines bleed into each other, where the boundaries between past, present, and future have dissolved. When Melina burns the Erdtree, she's not just opening the path to becoming Elden Lord. She's cauterizing a temporal wound, using fire to seal off certain timelines while opening others. The burning of the Erdtree has happened, is happening, will happen, all simultaneously. Your choice of ending doesn't determine the future. It determines which timeline becomes dominant, which version of reality overwrites the others. The 2 fingers and 3 fingers represent not just different ideologies, but different temporal philosophies. The 2 fingers seek to maintain order, including temporal order, keeping the timelines separated and structured. The 3 fingers seek to burn away all distinction, including the distinction between past, present, and future, returning everything to the one great, where time has no meaning. The struggle between them isn't just about the fate of the lands between, it's about the nature of time itself. Even the map of the lands between supports this temporal reading. Locations that should be impossibly distant are connected by gates that transport you instantly. These aren't just spatial shortcuts, they're temporal ones, connecting places that exist in different time periods. The underground areas, Nokron, Nokstella, the Lake of Rot, aren't just physically beneath the surface, but temporally beneath it. Older timelines buried under newer ones, yet still accessible, still present. The revelation that we might be playing in the past recontextualizes every interaction, every piece of lore, every environmental detail. The ruins aren't ruins. They're prophecies of destruction that hasn't happened yet. The demigods aren't mad from centuries of war. They're experiencing all of time simultaneously, driven to madness by temporal overflow. The Erdtree isn't dying. It exists in states of growth and decay simultaneously. A temporal paradox made manifest in root and leaf. As we reach the conclusion of this temporal expedition through the lands between, it's worth reflecting on what this theory means for our understanding of Elden Ring as a masterpiece of environmental storytelling. From Software hasn't just created a world with deep lore. They've created a world where the very nature of time and reality is part of that lore, where the gameplay mechanics of death and resurrection are woven into the fundamental structure of the universe. The beauty of the time travel theory lies not in proving it definitively true. From Software's storytelling intentionally resists such certainty, but in how it enriches our understanding of the game's mysteries. Whether we're literally in the past, experiencing temporal echoes, or navigating a reality where past and present have become meaningless distinctions, the evidence points to a world where time itself is as broken as the Elden Ring. This temporal fracturing explains why Elden Ring feels both ancient and immediate, why its lore seems to contradict itself, why characters speak in riddles and prophecies. They're not being deliberately obscure. They're experiencing time differently than we are, seeing all possibilities simultaneously, while we're limited to experiencing them sequentially. The game doesn't have plot holes. It has temporal vortexes where multiple truths coexist. Thank you, fellow travelers through time and lore, for joining me on this mind-bending exploration of Elden Ring's temporal mysteries. If this deep dive has opened your eyes to new interpretations of the lands between, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support makes these investigations possible, and trust me, we've only scratched the surface of the mysteries hidden in From Software's masterpiece. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our community of lore seekers as we continue to unravel the impossible histories and parallel presence of gaming's most enigmatic worlds. Remember, in the lands between, every ending is a beginning, every death is a birth, and every moment exists eternally in the storm beyond time. Until next time, this has been Keen 7 Lore, and may grace guide your way, whether that way leads forward, backward, or sideways through the shattered timelines of the lands between.